"Your daughter is alive! She's imprisoned!" The crow's hoarse, desperate cry, echoing like a curse through the mansion's sumptuous halls, made millionaire Ricardo's heart stop. Years of mourning for little Sophia, presumed dead in a fabricated accident, crumbled in an instant of icy terror and a flicker of agonizing hope. His wide eyes fixed on the bird, which flapped its wings frantically, pointing its beak at a dusty portrait, the smiling face of his wife, Laura. A knot of dread tightened in Ricardo's throat. What was the crow revealing? And the truth he would unearth about the monster sleeping beside him would be capable of destroying everything he knew. Laura's smiling face in the portrait seemed to mock him now. The image of a woman he loved and who had supported him through the worst years of his life. Incredulity squeezed Ricardo's chest, suffocating him. "Laura," he whispered, his voice choked, almost inaudible. "No, it can't be." Memories of his wife, always so sweet, so understanding, comforting him through sleepless nights after Sophia's loss, collided violently with the crow's hoarse accusation. It was as if the ground beneath his feet had vanished, leaving him on the edge of an abyss of distrust and pain. The crow, however, did not back down. Its black, penetrating eyes fixed on Ricardo's, and it let out another sharp caw, almost a lament before flying to the fireplace. There, on the cold marble, lay a small silver locket, which had belonged to Sophia, a birthday gift Ricardo had given his daughter shortly before the fateful day. The bird pecked the object urgently, then looked at Ricardo, as if imploring him to understand the gravity of its message. Ricardo's mind spun in a whirlwind. Logic screamed that it was impossible, that grief was driving him mad, that an animal could not communicate such complexity. But the crow, flapping its wings with a contained fury, seemed to carry the truth in every feather, in every desperate movement. A shiver ran down Ricardo's spine. He approached the fireplace, his steps heavy, as if each one brought him closer to a revelation he feared. He picked up the locket, feeling the cold metal in his trembling fingers. The small engraving of the initials SM, Sofia Montero, seemed to burn his palm. The crow, now perched on the edge of the fireplace, watched him with an intensity that transcended simple animal intelligence. It tilted its head, let out a low croak, and suddenly flew to the old bookshelf, where a series of family albums were kept. With its beak, it pulled out one of the albums, the oldest one, which contained photos of Sophia's childhood. Ricardo felt his heart race. That album was a sanctuary of memories, rarely touched for fear of rekindling the pain. To see the crow, his faithful companion, manipulate it with such precision was disturbing. He picked up the album, his hands cold with sweat. The crow then landed on his shoulder, and with its beak, gently nudged Ricardo's head towards a specific page. It was a photo of Sophia, still a baby, in Laura's arms, who smiled at the camera with an expression of unwavering sweetness. But the crow didn't stop there. It repeatedly pecked the corner of the photo, where there was a small, dark smudge, almost imperceptible. Ricardo frowned, confused. A smudge? He had never noticed it. With his thumb, he tried to wipe it off, but realized it wasn't dirt. It was a small tear, almost a perforation, that seemed to have been made intentionally. A pang of distrust, cold and sharp, began to pierce the armor of his denial. The crow, sensing the change in its owner, let out one last urgent caw before flying to the window, looking out as if indicating that the truth lay beyond those walls, waiting to be discovered. Ricardo felt a lump in his throat. That animal, always so enigmatic, now seemed to be the only bridge to a truth he dared not conceive. The image of Laura, the devoted wife, now mingled with a chilling shadow of doubt, and Ricardo knew he could no longer ignore the signs. The search for the truth, however painful, had begun. Ricardo turned away from the window, his heart beating erratically. Sombra landed on the sill, watching him with onyx eyes, awaiting his next move. The mansion, once a refuge, now seemed enveloped in an oppressive silence, every shadow lurking a secret. Ricardo needed to act, but his mind, still in shock, struggled to process the magnitude of what Sombra was implying. Could his Laura, the woman he loved, Sophia's mother, be capable of such cruelty? The idea was poison in his veins. He walked to the living room, where Laura's portrait smiled. His eyes scanned her face, searching for a crack in the perfect facade. He found nothing, only the woman he had married, his companion. But Sombra didn't lie, never had. With a sigh, Ricardo decided he needed proof, something concrete to confront the conflicting feelings that assailed him. That night, Ricardo observed Laura as never before. Every laugh, affectionate touch, comforting word was filtered through the cold lens of suspicion. During dinner, she spoke about her day, about plans for the garden, about a friend's visit. Ricardo nodded, forcing a smile, while his mind analyzed every nuance. Laura seemed the same, attentive and loving, which made the situation more torturous. Her normalcy was his greatest torment, contrasting with the image of a monster that Sombra had painted. Sombra was unusually quiet, perched on his stand in the library. His eyes never left Ricardo. It was as if the animal knew of its owner's internal battle, a war between love and truth. Ricardo felt the weight of Sombra's gaze, a reminder that he could not back down, not while doubt hung over his daughter. The next day, Ricardo began to revisit the details of Sophia's accident. He remembered the excruciating pain, the fog that clouded his mind during the days of mourning. Laura had taken care of everything, from the funeral to the memorial arrangements. She had been his rock and pillar. Now he needed to unearth every fragment of that memory, looking for inconsistencies, something that might have gone unnoticed in his overwhelming grief. He asked his assistant, Marcos, to bring the boxes of old documents from the office. As Marcos organized the papers, Ricardo noticed Sombra agitated again. The animal flew to the table where Marcos was placing the folders, insistently pecking a sealed, cream-colored envelope at the bottom of one of the boxes. Marcos, loyal and discreet, looked at Ricardo with confusion. "What does he want, Mr. Ricardo?" he asked, pointing to the crow. Ricardo felt a shiver. That envelope. He didn't recognize it. It was sealed, with no sender. Forgotten for years. Sombra croaked, flapping its wings harder, as if time was running out. Ricardo reached out, his heart pounding, to take the envelope Sombra insisted on showing. The truth was beginning to unfold, and he knew that each revelation would be a blow to his soul. Ricardo picked up the cream envelope, feeling the strange texture of the aged paper. The initials SM were subtly embossed in the lower corner, the same initials as Sophia's locket. A shiver ran down his spine. He tore the seal with trembling fingers, the sound echoing in the silence of the library. Inside, there was a single folded sheet of paper and a small photograph faded by time. First, he pulled out the photograph. It was an image of Sophia, not as he remembered her on the day of the accident, but a little older, perhaps 7 or 8 years old. She was smiling, a somewhat forced smile, in a setting Ricardo didn't recognize. There was an exposed brick wall and a barred window in the background. His eyes widened. That wasn't a family photo. It wasn't from his house. And Sophia. She looked different, thinner, with a gaze that, even smiling, carried a deep melancholy. Sombra, perched on Ricardo's shoulder, pecked the photo with a low croak, almost a lament. Marcos, who watched the scene with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension, stepped forward. "Mr. Ricardo, who is that child? She looks like little Sophia, but—" His voice trailed off, realizing the gravity of the situation. Ricardo ignored Marcos for a moment, his mind in a whirlwind. The photo was irrefutable proof. Sophia was alive at the time he mourned her as dead. The girl's age in the image suggested that the farce had extended for years after the supposed accident. The air left his lungs. Laura's betrayal, once a distant shadow, now materialized into a cruel image. With still trembling hands, Ricardo unfolded the letter. There was no sender, no signature. The handwriting was delicate, but the words were like daggers. Ricardo, if you are reading this, it is because the truth has finally found a way. Your daughter is alive. Laura hid her from you, driven by a sick envy and greed for your fortune. She fabricated the accident. I couldn't bear the weight of this secret any longer. But I feared for my life and Sophia's. Find her. She is in a place Laura considered safe, away from your eyes. Look for Laura's great-aunt's summer house, the one that was sold years ago and that Laura always visited in secret. There you will find more clues. Forgive me for not acting sooner. May justice be done. The paper slipped from Ricardo's fingers, falling onto the table. Laura's great-aunt's summer house, he remembered. An isolated place in the countryside, which Laura said had been sold to a distant family. She was always vague about the details. With each word of the letter, a piece of his heart shattered. Laura, his sweet Laura, was a monster. Envy, greed. It all fit the crow's premise. Marcos picked up the letter from the floor, reading it quickly. His eyes widened in shock, and he looked at Ricardo with an expression of horror. Mr. Ricardo, this is unbelievable. Ricardo closed his eyes, trying to contain the wave of nausea and rage that washed over him. The pain of the grief he had carried for years transformed into a cold fury. Sombra, sensing its owner's anguish, rubbed its beak against his cheek, a gesture of comfort. Ricardo opened his eyes, a new determination shining in them. He could no longer hesitate. Sophia was alive. He had to find her. The summer house. It was the next step, the only direction amidst the chaos. He looked at Marcos, his voice choked but firm. Marcos, I need you to get the car ready. We're going to the countryside. Now. Marcos nodded, the seriousness on his face reflecting the gravity of the situation. Immediately, Mr. Ricardo. The car will be ready in 15 minutes. As Marcos hurried off, Ricardo felt a wave of adrenaline and dread. The mansion, once a home of comfort and memories, now seemed a stage for a cruel farce. He needed air. He walked to the window, Sombra flying to his shoulder, and looked out at the well-kept garden where Sophia used to play. Her image, alive, smiling, but with the melancholy in those eyes in the photo, squeezed his chest. Laura's betrayal was a poison that corroded every happy memory. 15 minutes later, Ricardo and Sombra were in the car, Marcos at the wheel. The silence was heavy, broken only by the soft hum of the engine and Ricardo's tumultuous thoughts. He held the photo and the letter with the strength of a shipwreck survivor clinging to a piece of wood. Every curve in the road, every kilometer traveled, seemed to bring him closer to a truth he both desired and feared. The image of Laura, the woman he loved, disintegrated in his mind, replaced by a dark and calculating figure. How could he have been so blind? The pain of self-reproach was almost as intense as the pain of betrayal. Sombra, restless, flapped its wings inside the travel cage, which Ricardo had placed on the passenger seat. The crow seemed to sense the urgency of the mission, its black eyes fixed on the road ahead, as if it too was anxious to reach the destination. Marcos, noticing the tension, tried to break the ice. Mr. Ricardo, Mrs. Laura's great-aunt's house. I remember hearing about it. A very remote place, almost forgotten. No one had visited it for years, as far as I knew. His words only reinforced the web of lies. Laura always said the house had been sold and that there was no longer any contact with the distant family. The journey stretched for hours. The urban landscape gave way to country roads, flanked by fields and dense forests. The sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple. When Marcos finally announced, "We're almost there, Mr. Ricardo. The road to the right leads to the property." Ricardo's heart leaped. He leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the thickening darkness. The summer house came into view, a dark and imposing silhouette against the twilight sky. It was an old, two-story building with dusty windows and closed shutters. The paint was peeling in several places, and the garden was overgrown with weeds, giving it an air of abandonment and mystery. There were no lights, no signs of life. A shiver ran through Ricardo. It was the perfect setting for a dark secret. Marcos stopped the car in front of the rusty gate. "Mr. Ricardo, do you want me to go ahead?" he asked, his voice a little hesitant. Ricardo shook his head. "No, Marcos. This is something I need to do alone. But thank you for coming." He opened the car door, feeling the cold night air. Sombra, with a croak, flew from the cage and landed on his shoulder, its eyes gleaming in the gloom. With a push, Ricardo opened the gate, which creaked in protest, and walked along the path covered with dry leaves. Each step was an echo of his determination. The house seemed to breathe a heavy silence, guarding long-held secrets. He climbed the porch steps, the wood creaking under his feet. The front door was locked, but Ricardo noticed a small side window, slightly ajar. Carefully, he pushed it, and it yielded with a groan. The interior was dark and dusty, permeated with the smell of mold and abandonment. The faint moonlight filtering through the windows revealed furniture covered by white sheets, like silent ghosts. Sombra flew from Ricardo's shoulder, landing on a coffee table, and let out an urgent caw, pointing its beak at a dark corner of the room. There, hidden under a pile of old newspapers, Ricardo saw a small rag doll, worn and familiar. It was Sophia's favorite doll, the one she never let go of. A tear rolled down Ricardo's face. Sophia was here. She had been here. The truth, cold and cruel, was revealing itself. Ricardo knelt, his trembling fingers touching the rag doll. It was him, the floppy-eared rabbit, with one eye unstitched, that Sophia carried everywhere. The sight of that worn toy, forgotten there, was like a silent cry from his daughter, an echo of her presence. A wave of emotions hit him. The stabbing pain of loss, the burning anger at Laura's betrayal, and an overwhelming hope that now burned in his chest. Sophia was alive. She had been there perhaps for years. He felt her in every fiber of his being, the presence of his little one. Sombra, with a soft croak, flew to the shelf above, pecking at a loose board. Ricardo looked up, his mind sharpened by urgency. He pushed the board, revealing a small secret compartment. Inside, there was a faded children's diary and a handful of drawings. Ricardo's hands trembled as he picked up the diary. The cover read, in childish, hesitant handwriting, "Sophia's diary." He opened the diary, the yellowed pages smelling of time and secrets. The first entries were simple, about games and missing her father, but as he read on, the tone changed. There were descriptions of lonely days, of an Aunt Laura who came to visit, bringing food and toys, but who always reminded her that she couldn't go out, that the world outside was dangerous. With each word, Laura's cruelty became more palpable, more monstrous. Sophia wrote about hoping that one day her father would find her, about night fears and the loneliness that accompanied her. One of the drawings showed a small girl with long hair sitting on a bed, looking at a barred window. The exposed brick wall, exactly as in the photograph Sombra had revealed. Ricardo felt a lump in his throat. There was no longer any doubt. Laura had kept Sophia prisoner there, in that forgotten place for years, while he mourned her as dead. The image of the devoted wife crumbled completely, revealing the coldness of a calculating and cruel mind. Sombra flew into the hallway, letting out an insistent caw. Pointing to a door at the back, Ricardo stood up, determination hardening his expression. He needed to see where Sophia had lived, feel the pain she felt, and find any trace that could lead him to her now. With each step, the floorboards creaked, and the silence of the house seemed to amplify the furious beating of his heart. The door was unlocked. He opened it slowly, revealing a small, Spartan room, a single bed, a built-in wardrobe, and a small table with a chair. On the wall above the bed there were height marks, growing year after year, and a scribbled calendar, with days marked by small X's. The last X was 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. Sophia had been there very recently. In the wardrobe, Ricardo found some folded children's clothes and a small wooden chest. As he opened it, his eyes welled up. Inside there were more drawings, some colorful stones, and a note written on crumpled paper with the same childish handwriting as the diary. "Daddy, if you find this, know that I'm okay. Aunt Laura took me somewhere else. She said it was for my safety. I don't know where I am, but I know you'll find me. I love you." The note was undated, but the handwriting seemed a little more mature. Sophia had been taken somewhere else. Ricardo's mind worked feverishly. Somewhere else. Where? Laura wouldn't have a second obvious captivity. He looked at the calendar. 3 weeks. There was a chance. He needed to think like Laura, predict her next moves. Sombra, who had landed on the barred window, pecked the glass forcefully, then looked at Ricardo and flew out towards the darkness of the forest. The crow wasn't pointing to a new place, but to a direction. Ricardo felt a shiver. The forest. There was a trail that led to the back of the property, a trail Laura used for walks. Could it be possible? He needed to follow Sombra, follow every instinct, every sign. Every second, Sophia's life was at stake. The journey was far from over. He left the room, his heart racing, ready for the next step of his desperate search. Ricardo left the house, the moonlight barely penetrating the dense foliage of the forest. Sombra, with a croak, flew ahead, its black eyes shining like small jewels in the darkness. The night air was cold and damp, and the smell of wet earth and decaying leaves filled his lungs. Ricardo felt his heart race, not just from the physical exertion, but from the mixture of dread and hope that propelled him. Every branch that snapped under his feet, every whisper of the wind through the trees, seemed to carry a secret, an echo of Sophia's suffering. The forest was a labyrinth of shadows and distorted silhouettes. Sombra didn't hesitate, flying low between the tree trunks, sometimes landing on a branch to wait for Ricardo, then moving on with a palpable urgency. Ricardo stumbled over exposed roots, branches whipping his face, but he didn't stop. The image of Sophia, with that melancholic smile in the photo and the hesitant handwriting in the diary, was a beacon in his darkness. He needed to find her, rescue her from the clutches of Laura, the woman he once loved. After what seemed like hours, but might have been only minutes, Sombra took a longer flight, disappearing for a moment before reappearing, cawing insistently. Ricardo followed it, swerving through a tangle of dense bushes, and noticed a small, almost imperceptible clearing. In the center, hidden by the vegetation, was a rustic cabin, barely visible in the gloom. It was small, made of rough wood, and looked more like an abandoned hunter's refuge than anything else. A shiver ran through Ricardo. That wasn't a house, it wasn't a captivity for Sophia. It was something different. Sombra landed on the cabin's small porch, pecking at the worn wooden door. Ricardo approached cautiously, his heart pounding. The door was unlocked. He opened it slowly, revealing a dark and dusty interior. There was no furniture, just an improvised table made of wooden logs and some crates. Sombra flew to the table, pecking at an object Ricardo hadn't immediately noticed. It was a small battery-powered radio with its antenna extended, and beside it, a folded map. Ricardo picked up the map, his hands trembling. It was a map of the region, with a specific area circled in red, a few hours away from the summer house. There was also a date scribbled in the margin, tomorrow at dawn. His eyes widened. That wasn't a clue about Sophia's whereabouts, but rather about Laura's next step. The cabin was a meeting point, a place for her to plan, perhaps with accomplices, or to prepare for a new escape. The radio, the map, the date. Everything indicated that Laura was active, on the move, and that her plans were about to materialize. Ricardo felt a wave of fury and despair. Sophia wasn't there, but the truth about Laura deepened, revealing an even more calculating mind than he imagined. The woman he knew was orchestrating a complex plot, and he was just one step behind. The turning point was clear. The search was no longer for a captivity, but for Laura and her next moves. He needed to intercept her before Sophia was taken to an even more unreachable place. Sombra, as if reading his thoughts, flew to Ricardo's shoulder, rubbing its beak against his cheek, a gesture of urgency and support. Ricardo looked at the map, the circled area burning in his mind. He needed to go back to Marcos, to the car, and follow that new clue. With each second, Sophia was further away, but Ricardo's determination was unwavering. He would find her, no matter the cost. Ricardo left the cabin, the crumpled map in his hands, his heart beating a frantic rhythm against his ribs. Sombra, with an urgent call, flew ahead, guiding him back along the dark trail. The forest seemed even denser now, every shadow a possible hiding place, every sound an echo of his own fears. He stumbled, but the image of Sophia, alive and waiting, was the force that propelled him. With each step, the anger at Laura mingled with the pain of betrayal, but the hope of reuniting with his daughter was a fire that burned stronger. When he finally reached the car, Marcos was standing beside it, concern etched on his face. "Mr. Ricardo, are you all right? What did you find in there?" He noticed Ricardo's tense expression and the map in his hands. Ricardo extended the map, pointing to the circled area. "Marcos, Laura is planning something, a new move, this map, this date. She's going to take Sophia further away. Tomorrow at dawn." Ricardo's voice was choked but firm, laden with unwavering determination. Marcos took the map, his eyes scanning the markings. "Tomorrow at dawn. That's in a few hours, Mr. Ricardo. We need to go now." The assistant's loyalty was a balm for Ricardo, a reminder that he wasn't alone in this battle. They got into the car. Sombra settled in the cage, its eyes fixed on Ricardo, as if sharing the anguish and urgency. Marcos started the engine, and the vehicle cut through the darkness of the night, leaving the cabin and the summer house behind. The silence in the car was filled with Ricardo's tumultuous thoughts. He looked at the map, the area circled in red, a small town on the edge of a secondary highway. Laura wasn't just hiding Sophia, she was orchestrating an elaborate escape driven by a cruelty he never imagined. With each kilometer, the image of the woman he loved disintegrated, revealing a calculating coldness that deeply shocked him. How could he have been so blind? The pain of self-reproach was almost as intense as the pain of betrayal. The sky began to lighten, painting the horizon with soft shades of pink and orange when Marcos announced, "We're almost there, Mr. Ricardo. The town is just ahead." Ricardo's heart leaped. The tension was almost unbearable. They approached the small town, which still slept under the faint light of dawn. Marcos followed the map's directions, turning onto a side street further from the center. At the end of the street, isolated and almost hidden by old trees, was a small bus station, deactivated for years, with a rusty sign and broken windows. An old, dusty bus was parked in front, its lights off. "It's here, Mr. Ricardo," Marcos said, his voice almost a whisper. Ricardo felt a shiver. There were no signs of life, but the presence of the bus was undeniable. Sombra, restless, began to caw inside the cage, flapping its wings forcefully. Ricardo opened the car door, feeling the cold morning air. His eyes scanned the place, looking for any clue. Hope mingled with dread. He needed to be cautious, but there was no time to hesitate. Sophia was there or was about to be taken. He walked towards the station, each step echoing in the morning silence. The bus door was slightly ajar, like a silent invitation to the unknown. Ricardo pushed the bus door, which creaked like an ancient lament. The darkness inside was almost total. Only slits of dawn light filtered through the dirty windows, revealing rows of dusty seats. A smell of mold and abandonment hung in the air. Sombra, with an urgent caw, flew inside, its black eyes piercing the gloom, and landed on one of the back seats, pecking the upholstery insistently. Ricardo's heart beat erratically, a furious drum. He took a hesitant step inside, his eyes slowly adjusting. In the back, crouched in a corner, almost invisible under a worn blanket, was a small figure. A lump formed in Ricardo's throat. It was her. It had to be. With hurried steps, he crossed the narrow aisle. Sombra flew to Ricardo's shoulder, rubbing its beak against his cheek. Ricardo knelt beside the figure, his hands trembling. Gently, he pulled back the blanket. There she was, Sophia. Her long, tangled hair covered part of her face, but her eyes, though frightened and teary, were unmistakable. The same melancholic eyes from the photo, now filled with a mixture of fear and surprise. "Sophia?" Ricardo's voice came out in a hoarse whisper. The girl blinked, her thin lips parted in a small gasp. For an instant, she seemed not to believe, her eyes fixed on her father's face, as if he were a mirage. Then a spark of recognition lit up in them, and a solitary tear rolled down her pale cheek. "Daddy," she whispered back, her voice weak, almost inaudible. Ricardo couldn't hold back his own tears. He pulled her into a tight embrace, feeling the fragility of her small body against his. Her scent, a mix of dust and childhood, filled his lungs. It was real. She was alive. The relief was so overwhelming that he felt his legs weaken. "My daughter. My little Sophia." "I found you," he murmured, kissing the top of her head repeatedly. Sophia, at first rigid, relaxed in his arms, clinging to his shirt with surprising strength. She cried softly, a cry of relief and accumulated pain. Marcos, who had approached the bus door, watched the scene with teary eyes. He said nothing, just stood there, a pillar of silent support. Sombra, perched on Ricardo's shoulder, gently pecked Sophia's hair, as if also celebrating the reunion. Ricardo pulled back a little, holding Sophia's face between his hands. She was thin, pale, and there was a deep sadness in her eyes, but life pulsed within her. "You're safe now, my love. No one will hurt you anymore," he promised. His voice choked with emotion. Sophia nodded, her eyes still full of tears, but a small smile, fragile and hopeful, began to appear on her lips. Carefully, Ricardo picked her up. She was light, much lighter than he remembered. As they left the bus, the dawn light bathed Sophia's face, revealing the extent of her paleness, but also the unwavering beauty of her childhood. Sombra flew high, circling above them, a winged guardian. Marcos opened the car door, his eyes fixed on Sophia with a mixture of compassion and reverence. Ricardo settled Sophia in the back seat, next to Sombra's cage, which was now in a comforting silence. He sat beside her, holding her small, cold hand. "We're going home, Sophia, to our home," he said, instilling security and love in his words. Sophia just squeezed his hand, her eyes fixed on the landscape that was beginning to light up outside, a landscape she hadn't seen for years. Marcos started the engine, and the car drove off, leaving behind the abandoned bus station and the years of suffering. The way back would be long, not just in kilometers, but in the journey of healing and reconstruction. Ricardo knew that Sophia's emotional scars would be deep and that Laura's betrayal had left an indelible mark on their lives. But, at that moment, as he felt his daughter's hand in his, a new hope blossomed in his heart. Justice would be served for Laura, but the most important thing was that his Sophia was back. Their love would be the strength to overcome any obstacle. The car moved steadily, carrying Ricardo and Sophia away from the nightmare. Sophia, nestled in his lap with her head against his chest, seemed like a small wounded bird that had finally found its safe nest. Ricardo felt the warmth of her body, her soft and uneven breathing, and every beat of his own heart seemed to echo the promise that he would never leave her again. He stroked her tangled hair, feeling its fine texture and realizing how fragile she was. The paleness of her face, the deep dark circles under her eyes, were silent witnesses to years of suffering. Marcos drove with an almost reverent discretion, glancing in the rearview mirror from time to time, a contained smile of relief on his lips. Sombra, in the cage, was strangely quiet, as if it understood the delicacy of the moment. Its black eyes, once so frantic, now observed the scene with a protective serenity. Ricardo knew that the journey back home was only the first step of a long and arduous path. Sophia's wounds weren't visible on her skin, but he felt them in every tremor of her body, in every sigh she let out. He remembered the diary, the drawings, the loneliness she had described. Guilt squeezed his chest, a dull, constant pain for not having found her sooner, for having been so cruelly deceived. "It's all right, my love. Daddy's here," he whispered, his voice choked, kissing Sophia's forehead. She curled up even more, seeking refuge in his arms, and Ricardo felt a renewed strength, an unwavering determination to make up for every lost day, every tear shed. When they arrived at the mansion, the sun was already high, bathing the imposing facade with a golden light. The house, once a symbol of his perfect life, now seemed a stage for the farce Laura had staged. But as he got out of the car with Sophia in his arms, Ricardo saw the house from a new perspective. A sanctuary, a place to rebuild, to heal. The household staff, alerted by Marcos, were at the door, with expressions of shock and relief. Donna Elsa, the long-time housekeeper, a woman with grey hair and kind eyes, ran to them, her hands covering her mouth in a gesture of disbelief and joy. Tears streamed down her wrinkled face as she saw little Sophia, whom she thought she had lost forever. "My girl, my little Sophia," she exclaimed, extending her arms with affection. Sophia, hearing the familiar voice, lifted her head from Ricardo's shoulder, her eyes wide with surprise and a glimpse of recognition. Ricardo handed her to Donna Elsa, who hugged her with a grandmother's tenderness. "She needs a warm bath, clean clothes, and something to eat, Elsa." "And lots of affection?" Ricardo asked, his voice still hoarse with emotion. As Donna Elsa led Sophia inside, Ricardo watched the scene, his heart overflowing. Sophia's presence in the house, Elsa's genuine reaction, all of it was a balm for his wounded soul. He felt Sombra land on his shoulder, a soft croak, as if a reminder that evil had been unmasked and the light of truth, though painful, had prevailed. The mansion, once silent and full of ghosts of a life that didn't exist, now seemed to breathe again, filled with the promise of a bright future, of laughter and love. Ricardo knew that the path would be long, that trust would be restored step by step, and that Sophia's emotional scars would require patience and unconditional love. But at that moment, seeing his daughter in Elsa's arms, he felt a deep peace. The family was reuniting, and the journey of healing had begun. He turned to Marcos, a look of gratitude in his eyes. "Thank you, Marcos, for everything." Marcos simply nodded, a sincere smile on his face. The reconstruction of Sophia and Ricardo's lives would be a work of love, brick by brick, day after day. with the unwavering certainty that the bond that united them was stronger than any betrayal. Ricardo watched Donna Elsa lead Sofia into the mansion, his heart still tight with emotion, but now flooded with a warm wave of relief. The housekeeper's embrace, her choked voice, the way Sofia nestled into her, even frightened, was a balm. He knew Elsa would be a safe harbor for the girl, a familiar and loving face amidst so much chaos. The house, once a labyrinth of painful memories and dark secrets, now seemed to vibrate with a new energy, the promise of a new beginning. Sombra, with a soft croak, landed on his shoulder, rubbing its beak against his ear, as if sharing his exhaustion and joy. Ricardo felt a lump in his throat. The crow, his faithful and unlikely ally, had been the beacon that guided him through the darkness. He climbed the stairs slowly, each step feeling lighter than before. The mansion was silent, only the distant echo of soft voices coming from the guest wing where Donna Elsa was caring for Sofia. Ricardo knew the girl needed space, time to process everything, to feel safe again. He went to his office, feeling the weight of Laura's betrayal still on his shoulders. Her image, cold and calculating, superimposed itself on the memory of the affectionate woman he thought he knew. The pain of self-reproach was almost unbearable. How could he have been so blind? The guilt for every day Sofia spent in captivity gnawed at him, but the determination to make up for every lost moment was even stronger. He sat at his desk, his gaze fixed on Sofia's portrait that once tormented him, but which was now a reminder of his victory, of his living daughter. Marcos entered discreetly with a steaming cup of tea. "The police have already been notified, Mr. Ricardo. Laura has been located and detained. Justice will take care of the rest." Marcos's voice was firm, but his eyes conveyed deep compassion. Ricardo merely nodded, Marcos's words confirming the end of a dark chapter. He felt no joy at Laura's arrest, only an emptiness, the realization that the love he believed he had was a cruel illusion. Justice, yes, was necessary, but the real battle would be to heal Sofia's invisible wounds and his own. Later, Ricardo approached the room where Sofia was. The door was slightly ajar, and he could hear Donna Elsa's soft voice reading a story. He peeked in. Sofia was lying in bed, clean and in soft clothes, her hair combed, but still with the paleness and fragility that distressed him. Her eyes were fixed on the housekeeper, a small flame of interest beginning to shine in them. Ricardo felt a wave of tenderness. He needed to be patient, to rebuild trust, to show her that the world was not just darkness and fear. He entered the room, and Donna Elsa smiled at him, getting up to leave. "She's a little calmer now, Mr. Ricardo, but very tired." Ricardo nodded, sitting on the edge of the bed. Sofia looked at him, her large, expressive eyes still carrying a trace of fear, but also a childish curiosity. He extended his hand, and she hesitantly placed her small hand in his. The touch was a thin but real thread, connecting them again. "Hi, my love," he whispered, stroking her hair. "Daddy's here." Sofia said nothing, but squeezed his hand a little tighter. At that moment, Ricardo knew that the journey would be long, but that love, patience, and unwavering presence would be the pillars to rebuild his daughter's life, brick by brick, day after day, until the light shone fully in her eyes again. The following days were a ballet of patience and hope. Sofia remained silent, her melancholic eyes observing the world with apprehension. She ate little, slept intermittently, flinching at every sound. Ricardo dedicated every minute to her, reading stories, showing photo albums. He spoke about the gardens, the flowers, the toys. Donna Elsa was an angel of tenderness, preparing dishes, combing her hair. Marcos ensured the house was a refuge of peace. Sombra remained a constant presence. It perched on Sofia's bedroom window, watching her with intelligent eyes, emitting a soft croak. Ricardo noticed that the girl wasn't startled. Her eyes followed its movements. One morning, he found Sombra on the bed sill, gently pecking one of her fingers as she slept. A small smile, the first in days, appeared on Sophia's lips when she woke up and saw the crow so close. It was a sign of hope. Guilt still gnawed at Ricardo. He relived Laura's farce, every affectionate word spoken while she kept his daughter captive. How could he have been so blind? The pain of seeing Sophia so fragile was a burden. He feared she would never again be the vibrant girl she once was. But with each small gesture, a less frightened look, a gentle squeeze of the hand, hope ignited, fueling his determination. One afternoon, Ricardo took Sophia to the garden. The sun was gentle, the flowers she loved in full bloom. He carried her in his arms, feeling her light weight. He sat on a stone bench, with Sophia on his lap, pointing to the butterflies among the roses. Sombra flew from above, landing on a nearby branch. Ricardo began to talk about Sophia's mother, her true mother, who had passed away when she was little, and how she loved that garden. He described her mother's laughter, the way she cradled her, trying to fill the memory gaps Laura had created. Sophia, who had only been observing, turned her face to him. Her eyes, previously distant, fixed on his, full of emotion. She extended a small, pale hand and touched Ricardo's face, a simple yet significant gesture. "Daddy, I remember a song," she whispered, her voice weak, but with a clarity that made him hold his breath. It was the first time she had spoken more than one word since the rescue. A song that Mommy used to sing, about a little bird that flew high and found its way back home. Tears rolled down Ricardo's face. He hugged her tightly, feeling the warmth of her body, the miracle of that voice. Sombra, on the branch, emitted a soft croak. Sophia, nestled in his arms, continued, "The little bird. It found me." She looked at Sombra, and then at Ricardo, and a smile, still fragile but genuine, lit up her face. It was a smile that promised the return of light. In that instant, Ricardo knew that the true climax wasn't Laura's arrest, but this moment of connection, the melody of hope that Sophia had found in the darkness. The journey would be long, but the first and most important step had been taken. Love, patience, and unwavering presence would be the pillars to rebuild his daughter's life, day after day, until the light shone in her eyes again. The song of the little bird, the memory of her mother, and Sombra's silent presence were the first rays of sun in a dawn Ricardo had waited for years. That dawn, with Sophia's fragile voice and the touch of her hand, was the turning point Ricardo had so longed for. The tears that rolled down his face were no longer of pain, but of deep gratitude. He hugged her again, feeling every beat of her small heart, and knew that the darkness was, finally, beginning to dissipate. Sombra, on the branch, emitted a croak that sounded like a song of celebration, and Sophia, nestled in her father's arms, looked at the crow with a sparkle of admiration and curiosity in her eyes. In the days that followed, the mansion filled with a new melody, a soft symphony of hope. It wasn't boisterous laughter, but the delicate sounds of a child, slowly rediscovering the joy of living. Sophia began to explore, first the safe corners of her room, then the hallway, always with Ricardo or Donna Elsa nearby, her small hands holding theirs with confidence. Her eyes, previously distant and teary, began to fix on the details of the world. The sun's glint in the window, the texture of a rug, the vibrant colors of the flowers Ricardo brought. Sombra was her constant companion, perching on her shoulder as she drew, gently pecking her fingers when she lost herself in thought. The girl, who once flinched, now reached out to stroke the crow's dark feathers, a gesture of trust and affection that warmed Ricardo's heart. Donna Elsa, with her wisdom and patience, prepared Sophia's favorite dishes, told stories of her childhood in the mansion, and enveloped her in a web of affection and security that silently healed her wounds. Marcos, always discreet and efficient, ensured that the environment was one of complete tranquility, making sure no noise disturbed the newfound peace. Ricardo, in turn, dedicated himself to filling the voids Laura had left. He spoke about Sophia's true mother with palpable love, showing old photos, describing happy moments. Gradually, Sophia's distorted memories began to be replaced by luminous truths, by images of unconditional love that helped her reconstruct her own history and identity. The guilt that once gnawed at him, the pain of his blindness, began to give way to a serene acceptance and a new inner strength. Ricardo understood that the past, however painful, could not be changed. What mattered was the present, every second beside his daughter, and the future he was building with Sophia, a future of hope and truth. The figure of Laura, once a constant shadow, now receded, becoming a bitter memory, but without the power to paralyze him. He felt no hatred, only a deep sadness for the woman she became, and an even greater gratitude for having been freed from that cruel farce. Justice would run its course, but Ricardo's true victory was seeing the light return to his daughter's eyes, day after day. One day, as they leafed through an old photo album, sitting on the stone bench in the garden, Sophia pointed to an image of her true mother, smiling among the roses. She sang the little bird's song right here, she said, her voice still low, but with a clarity and emotion that made Ricardo's heart overflow with joy. He hugged her with the tenderness of 1,000 years, feeling the strength of her small body that was recovering. That moment, simple and deeply significant, was irrefutable proof that healing was happening. The love, patience, and unwavering presence of everyone, especially Sombra, were rebuilding Sophia's life, brick by brick, memory by memory. The path would still be long, with challenges and moments of sadness, but Ricardo knew that the light, which had once faded, was back to stay, guiding them to a future of hope, connection, and a love that overcomes all. The family, though different and marked by trials, was stronger than ever, united by truth and the unconditional bond that blossomed with each new dawn. The months that followed transformed Ricardo's mansion into a vibrant home, where the shadow of the past gave way to the light of hope. Sophia, with everyone's patience and unwavering love, blossomed like a rose unfurling after a long storm. Her eyes, once filled with fear, now shone with the curiosity and joy typical of a child. She laughed more, her soft laughter echoing through the corridors, a sound Ricardo never thought he would hear again. Mornings were filled with Sophia running through the gardens, Sombra flying above her like a silent guardian. The crow, which had once been the herald of misfortune, had become the symbol of Sophia's truth and freedom. It perched on her shoulder, pecked her hair, and the girl hugged it with an affection that surprised everyone. Ricardo watched these interactions with an overflowing heart. The connection between Sophia and Sombra was a magical bond, a constant reminder that, even in the deepest darkness, truth always finds its way to the light. Donna Elsa and Marcos continued to be essential and dedicated pillars. Elsa, with her grandmotherly affection, taught Sophia to bake cookies, to care for the garden plants, filling her day with activities that nourished her soul. Marcos, with his discretion and loyalty, ensured that life in the mansion flowed without interruptions, allowing Ricardo to dedicate all his time to his daughter. Ricardo, in turn, found his own healing in Sophia's recovery. The guilt that tormented him for his blindness lessened with each smile from his daughter, with each story she shared. He took her for walks, read books, and together they rebuilt lost memories, weaving a new tapestry of happy experiences. Sophia, with a growing curiosity, began to ask questions about the past, about the mother she had barely known. Ricardo spoke about Sophia's mother, not with sadness, but with a love that radiated, helping the girl understand her roots and build a solid identity. The figure of Laura, though a scar, no longer defined their lives. Justice was running its course, and Ricardo understood that forgiveness, though difficult, was a necessary step for his own peace. He did not forgive her for what she did to Sophia, but he forgave himself for having been deceived, freeing himself from the weight of bitterness. One day, as they watched the sunset from the top of the hill behind the mansion, Sophia, nestled in his arms, pointed to the sky. "Daddy, the little bird from the song. It's flying home," she said, her voice clear and full of a sweetness that made Ricardo cry with silent joy. Sombra, perched on his shoulder, croaked softly, as if confirming the girl's words. Ricardo hugged her tightly, feeling the fullness of the moment. The song of the little bird, which was once a fragile memory of a lost mother, was now a hymn of hope, resilience, and the love that always finds its way back. Life, he knew, was unpredictable and full of challenges. But with Sophia and the unbreakable bond that united them, they were ready for anything. The mansion, once a stage of secrets and pain, was now a sanctuary of love and laughter. The story of Ricardo and Sophia, marked by betrayal and overcoming, became a testament to the strength of human connection, the importance of family, and the truth that, like a faithful crow, always reveals the path to light. They had found their home, not just within the mansion's walls, but in each other's hearts, a home built on the rock of unconditional love. And so, under Sombra's watchful and protective gaze, they would continue their journey day after day, embracing each new dawn with gratitude and renewed hope. The years that followed wove a tapestry of serene and meaningful days in Ricardo's mansion. Sophia, now a grown girl, with bright eyes and an easy smile, was the personification of resilience. The shadows of the past had not completely disappeared, but had become merely a distant outline, unable to eclipse the light she radiated. Her laughter, once rare and restrained, echoed freely through the gardens, mingling with the birdsong and Sombra's familiar croak. The crow, a faithful companion, remained a constant and beloved presence. It followed Sophia like a winged shadow, perching on her shoulder during walks in the garden or watching her from high in a tree as she read her favorite books. The girl, in turn, talked to Sombra, sharing her secrets and joys as if the crow were a silent confidant, the guardian of her story and her rebirth. Ricardo saw this connection with immense tenderness, a living reminder of the truth Sombra had unveiled. Donna Elsa, her hair now whiter, but with the same gentle sparkle in her eyes, continued to be the maternal figure Sophia so desperately needed. Together, they prepared old recipes in the kitchen, whose walls filled with the aroma of cookies and the sound of stories told. Elsa taught Sophia about the garden flowers, about the importance of caring for what is beautiful and fragile, and the girl absorbed every lesson with the curiosity and wisdom of someone who learned the value of life in a unique way. Marcos, discreet and loyal as ever, ensured that the mansion was a haven of peace. He observed Sophia's transformation with a contained smile, feeling the satisfaction of having contributed to that family's happiness. His presence was a pillar of stability, allowing Ricardo to dedicate himself fully to his daughter. Ricardo, in turn, had found a peace he never thought possible. The guilt, which once consumed him, had transformed into deep gratitude. He understood that life was a gift, and every day beside Sophia, every smile, every hug was a blessing. He took her to see the world, on trips that filled her eyes with new wonders, and together, they built a treasure of memories that erased the scars of the past. Conversations about Sophia's true mother became more frequent and natural. Ricardo spoke of her with a love that transcended time, painting a vivid portrait of a gentle and loving woman. Sophia now carried with her not only the image of an idealized mother, but the certainty of her roots, of a love that preceded her and shaped her. Laura's distorted memories were replaced by a narrative of love and truth. The figure of Laura, though still a scar in memory, no longer held power over them. Justice had run its course, and Ricardo understood that forgiveness, though it didn't mean forgetting, was essential for his own freedom. He forgave himself for his blindness, and this self-acceptance freed him from the weight of bitterness, allowing him to live fully in the present. One day, as they watched the sunset from the top of the hill, with Sombra perched on Sophia's shoulder, the girl turned to Ricardo, her eyes reflecting the colors of the sky. "Daddy," she said, her voice clear and full of a sweetness that warmed Ricardo's heart. "I think the little bird from the song not only found its way back home, but also taught us to build a home in our hearts." Ricardo hugged her tightly, feeling the fullness of an unconditional love. Sombra croaked softly, as if agreeing. The song of the little bird, which was once a thin thread of hope, was now a hymn of resilience, overcoming, and the strength of family. They had found their home, not just within the mansion's walls, but in each other's hearts, a home built on the rock of love and truth. And so, under Sombra's watchful and protective gaze, they continued their journey, day after day, embracing each new dawn with gratitude and renewed hope, knowing that true love always prevails.